All right, so let's dive into something I know you've been curious about: government contracting. But we're not talking just any contracts here. We're zeroing in on the freight and logistics niche.
Right.
Yeah, think like big rigs, cargo planes, the whole shebang.
Right.
And to help us navigate all this, we're using this article. It's from XRT Logistics, and it's called Top 10 Best Practices for Successful Government Contracting. They've got a pretty solid reputation in the field, and they lay out some really interesting points, gotta say. One thing that really jumped out at me, though, was how lucrative this whole market can be. And luckily, I've got an expert here to help us break it all down.
That's right. Government contracts in this sector can be a real gold mine. They often mean really steady work and, potentially some long-term agreements. We're talking years here with agencies at all levels, not just one-off gigs.
Yeah, that's what got me so excited about this. So why is the government such a big customer in the freight and logistics space?
Well, think about it. Practically everything the government does involves moving stuff around, right?
Yeah.
Like military operations to building roads. They got to ship equipment, supplies, even people sometimes. And that need is not going away anytime soon.
That's a great point. It's like the government's this giant octopus with tentacles everywhere,
Yeah.
and every tentacle needs something shipped. Now, the article mentioned federal, state, and local level contracts. Are there big differences between those?
Oh, absolutely. A federal contract might involve shipping something like, sensitive military equipment overseas that could require some pretty tight security protocols. On the other hand, you have a state contract that could be for something like delivering supplies for a big bridge construction project. And then at the local level, you might be handling things like waste management or even public transportation within a city.
So the scale and the type of cargo can vary wildly depending on what level we're talking about. All right, so let's say someone's ready to start hunting to these contracts. Where do they even begin?
Well, the article mentions a few key platforms. For federal opportunities, there's sam.gov, then you've got your state procurement websites, and of course your local government websites, each with their own listings. The key is to set up alerts on those sites, for relevant keywords. You don't want to miss out because a notification got buried in your inbox.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah.
So you're constantly on the lookout for new opportunities as they pop up. Now, the article also distinguished between RFPs and RFQs, requests for proposals and requests for quotations. Can you break down the difference for us, and how do you tackle each one?
Okay, so an RFP, it's kind of like a job interview, right? You're presenting your qualifications, how you'd approach the project, all that. It requires a pretty detailed proposal outlining your methodology, your experience, basically what makes you stand out from the competition. Now, an RFQ is more straightforward. It's mainly focused on the price you're quoting for specific goods or services.
So for an RFP, you really need to sell yourself, huh? Now, the article really stressed the importance of compliance. They said failing to meet government regulations can have serious consequences.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Compliance is essential, especially for freight and logistics companies. Think about transporting hazardous materials, for example. There are strict regulations on handling and documentation just to ensure safety. Or you could consider the DCAA guidelines on cost accounting. Those are crucial when you're dealing with government funds.
So it's not just about moving things from point A to point B. There's a whole other layer of responsibility and meticulousness required. Okay, so let's say you've found a contract you like, you understand the requirements, and you're ready to craft that winning proposal.
Hmm.
In this field, what makes a proposal stand out?
Well, clarity and transparency are key. The agency needs to understand exactly what you'll achieve, how much it'll cost, and how long it'll take. Your budget and timeline have got to be realistic, and your scope of work should outline every step you'll take to deliver on the contract. But it's not just about presenting the facts. You need to tailor your proposal to the specific needs of the agency, show them you understand their pain points, and have solutions ready to go.
It's like a tailored suit, but for government agencies' logistics needs. One last thing that really jumped out at me from the article was the emphasis on certifications. Why are those so crucial, especially for small businesses?
Well, certifications are kind of like badges of credibility, especially for newcomers. They demonstrate that you meet certain standards and have the expertise to handle the work. Think of it like this. If you were hiring someone to handle your finances, wouldn't you feel better if they had a CPA certification? It's the same principle in government contracting.
Right, it's about building trust and proving you're not just winging it. So what kinds of certifications are we talking about in the freight and logistics world?
Oh, there are several, and some are tailored specifically for small businesses. The article mentioned SBAA. That's a program designed to help small, disadvantaged businesses compete. Then there's Hub Zone. That gives preference to businesses in historically underutilized areas. And then you have your industry-specific ones. For instance, if you're transporting hazardous materials, having a Hazen-MAT certification shows, the regulations inside and out.
So certifications are proof that you know your stuff, you can handle specific situations, and you're a reliable partner. It's like a cheat code to gain an edge in this competitive market.
Exactly. And that's especially important for those small businesses trying to stand out. Amongst all the bigger players.
Okay, so we've laid some groundwork here. Understanding the landscape of government contracting in freight and logistics. But before we jump into the nitty-gritty of winning those bids, let's take a moment to absorb all this. We'll be back to explore the strategies and tactics that can make you a government contracting champion.
Welcome back. Now that we've covered some basics, let's dive into the strategies that can actually help you land these government contracts.
All right, sounds good. I'm ready to be tactical. The article we were talking about really highlighted how much potential there is for small businesses in this market. It's not just for the big guys, right?
Definitely not. The government has set aside programs. They're designed specifically to help small businesses compete. Think of it like a lane on the highway reserved just for smaller vehicles, making sure they get a fair shot.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So what would be your top piece of advice for a small freight and logistics company? One that's looking to get into government contracting for the first time.
Networking is crucial. Attend industry events, connect with contracting officers, make sure your company is known. Remember that government agencies are made up of people. Building those relationships can really go a long way.
It's all about making connections and building that trust, right?
Yeah.
But what about those small business certifications we talked about earlier? Are those just a nice to have, or are they essential?
They're more than just nice to have, that's for sure. They signal to the government that you're serious, that you meet certain standards, and that you're committed to this market. Honestly, they can open up doors to opportunities that you wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Okay, so networking and certifications, got it. What other advice would you give to small businesses to help them stand out?
Well, in today's world, your online presence is like your storefront. Make sure your website is professional and up to date. It needs to clearly outline your services and your experience. Government agencies will do their research. And a well-designed website makes a great first impression.
It's like a virtual handshake. It says, hey, we're professional, we're reliable, and we're ready to work. Okay, let's say you want a contract, congrats. What are the secrets to effective contract management?
Communication and paying close attention to detail are key. Establish clear benchmarks to track your progress. Make sure you're hitting deadlines, and keep the contracting agency informed of any developments or challenges. You don't want any surprises to catch them off guard. Or you, for that matter.
So it's about staying organized and proactive, and making sure those lines of communication are always open. Makes sense. Now, the article mentioned contract modifications and extensions. Do those happen often with government contracts?
Oh, they're quite common, actually. The scope of work might change, or unforeseen delays might happen. Imagine you're contracted to transport supplies for disaster relief. The situation on the ground could change rapidly. That might require adjustments to the delivery schedule, or even the type of goods they need.
So being flexible is crucial then. You need to be able to adapt to those changes and just keep things running smoothly.
Exactly. Have clear protocols in place for handling those changes, and make sure everyone's on the same page about everything. Another critical aspect of contract management, especially in freight and logistics, is risk management.
Risk management. Yeah, I can see how that would be important when you're dealing with cargo and timelines and potentially hazardous materials.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You have to identify any potential risks early on and then come up with strategies to mitigate them. What if you're relying on a specific supplier for critical parts and they experience a disruption? Having a backup supplier or building in some buffer time, that can prevent a minor hiccup from becoming a major delay.
It's like having a plan B, maybe even a plan C, just to keep everything on track. All right, let's talk money. Pricing and budgeting for government contracts can be a bit tricky, right?
It can be, but it's not impossible. The key is understanding the different pricing models. The most common ones are fixed price, cost plus, and time and materials.
Okay, I know about fixed price contracts. That's where you agree on a set price up front. But what about those other two?
All right, so cost plus. That means the government reimburses you for your actual costs, plus an agreed upon profit margin. This model is often used for projects where the scope of work might be a little fluid.
It's like a safety net then, for when things are less predictable.
Exactly. Now, time and materials is similar, but you're charging for the actual hours worked and the materials you used. This is common for projects where the scope of work is tough to define up front, or if it's likely to change.
So the pricing model depends on the project and the level of risk involved. Do you have any other budgeting tips?
Meticulous record keeping is really important. Track every single expense and use budgeting software to stay organized. And remember to factor in those unexpected costs we talked about earlier. It's always better to overestimate than underestimate.
Solid advice. So we've covered a lot of ground here, the landscape, the strategies, and even the financial side of things. But what about the future? What trends are on the horizon, and how might they impact the freight and logistics niche?
That's a great question, and it's one that all companies in this space should be thinking about. The landscape is constantly evolving, right? Driven by advancements in technology and shifts in global trade patterns.
Okay, I'm listening. What do you see coming down the pipeline? What do you see coming down the pipeline?
Well, I think we're going to see a growing demand for specialized logistics solutions, particularly in areas like drone delivery, autonomous vehicles, and handling sensitive or high-tech cargo.
Wow. So it's not just about moving boxes anymore. It's about adapting to all this new technology.
Exactly. The companies that can integrate these emerging technologies, they'll definitely have a leg up in the future. We also might see more focus on sustainability and green logistics practices. Government agencies are getting more and more serious about environmental responsibility, so companies that can show they're committed to sustainable operations, they'll have a real advantage.
So it's not just about efficiency anymore. It's also about minimizing environmental impact. That makes sense with all the focus on sustainability these days.
For sure. And of course, cybersecurity is going to continue to be huge as logistics systems become more interconnected and reliant on tech, protecting sensitive data. And ensuring the integrity of the supply chains is going to be more critical than ever.
It sounds like a whole new world of challenges and opportunities out there.
It definitely is. The future of government contracting in freight and logistics is all about innovation and adaptability. You got to stay ahead of the curve.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. We've explored the landscape, the strategies, and even got a glimpse into the future of government contracting in this really interesting niche of freight and logistics.
It's been my pleasure.
A huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise, and to you, our listener, for joining us. Remember that the world of government contracting can seem complicated, but it's full of opportunities for those who are prepared. So keep learning, keep exploring, and who knows, maybe you'll find yourself securing a lucrative government contract and contributing to some really impactful projects in this world of freight and logistics.